everyone, welcome back. I was speaking to someone the other day, and they said to me that in a few years from now, comic books as we know them, will just cease to exist. And look, I found that very hard to believe because I grew up with comics. I'm still reading comics now. I know people who read comics. The person I was talking to is an avid comic book collector. So I asked him, well, why do you say that? And his reckoning was that with this saturation of sort of like media outlets, Netflix, Prime, various other satellite channels, we just have so much choice right now, so many options, and it's 24/7. It's available anytime. Long gone are the days of television channels which used to be on from like 6 in the morning until like 12 in the 12 midnight, and then everything was just static. No, 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 no. Those are the days of ye olden golden grandma days. Now you have 24-hour entertainment stations ongoing to feed you and your children's need for entertainment, whether that's superhero entertainment, whether that's traditional movies, whatever it is, it's always there. Now with superheroes and with comic books, when you read a comic book, when you go and buy a comic book to read a comic book, it takes effort. You go down, you take out your money, you buy the book, you come back home, you read the book, and then you stash the book away very, very carefully, especially if you're a comic book collector like me. But if everything has now been translated onto visual media, everything is there, everything's available. And of course, you can get comic books now online as well, right? You have these online compendiums and libraries of various comic books that you can read online without having to purchase anything or just like have any paper lying around in your house. Will comic books in the print version disappear? And I think it's a valid question, and I think it's a valid concern. I think it can happen. We are not the same people that we were 2 decades ago. Our tastes have changed. I think our sort of access to entertainment has accelerated to such an extent. I think we're very much now, as a people, as a society, I think we're very much accustomed now to almost instant gratification. Well, listen, I might want to go down to a comic book convention, pick up a few books, meet a few people. And at the moment, it's still there. The interest is still there. But down the road, life gets busy. It's stressful. Even with kids have so many things to do now. They don't have the same simple lives I think that we had. Exams are tougher. There's more sort of like entertainment options out there, which drives people crazy anyway. It's like, sometimes when you have less choice, you don't fuss as much because that it's either A or B. But when you have the entire alphabet at your disposal, what the hell do you choose, right? It gets very frustrating. It gets very annoying. The point being that, everything is available now, either in audible version or visual sort of like representation. Everything is there. So why would people purchase comic books anymore? The other thing to consider is that, as I mentioned, there's so much now out there in the visual format, whether it's movies or serials or cartoons pertaining to superheroes, that really, I suppose the question would be that since everything is available there anyway, and you have real life representations of your superheroes that you used to sort of like, read about years before, now that they're all available here on the big screen, why would you want to go back to comic books? In fact, I suppose with the sort of emotional depictions of these superheroes, almost becoming sort of, I don't know, better acquainted with these heroes on the big screen, would you need to go back to comic books? And again, I say this with reference to the younger generation. I think if you were introduced to comics in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, up to the early 2000s, you would be old enough to basically not be influenced by the current spate of superhero material that's out there on whether it's audible or visual. You've escaped that. Your earliest childhood memories of comic books are what links you to this whole superhero genre. Whereas with the generation, say a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, who's basically grown up, watching Thor and Iron Man and Superman and Batman, again, as part of the MCU or the DCU, they probably wouldn't be as vested in comic books because they wouldn't have that nostalgia element that I suppose many of us comic book collectors do have. I mean, I'll confess, I love reading comic books because it reminds me in many ways of the wonderful experiences I might have had as a child. Going back, sunny memories, happy days, going to the shop, buying your book, buying some chocolates along the way, it was a real event. It was a real event. But now, I don't think most children have that to fall back on. I think they're a lot more sort of insulated in relation to how much exposure they have to comic books, or that experience of actually going to buy a comic book in a corner shop. I don't think many corner shops really have that many comics now anyway. You can go to stores like W.H. Smith's or in the UK, W.H. Smith's still has comic books, but they're mostly sort of like compendium comic books. They're like collections of different stories, but you don't get like different sort of like standalone character comic books, like say a Detective Comics or a Superman Action Comics or the X-Men or things like that. They're usually sort of like collection books. So yeah, I think that for the younger generation who basically carry the future of comic books anyway, I mean, look, us older people will eventually sort of fade away. That's just the harsh reality of life, whether it's a few years or decades or whatever. What's going to happen after? Will the generations that come from now or directly after us, will they even care? Will the world even be in a position to really give a damn about reading anyway? Will in the future we all have like these like brain implants whereby if you want to read something you just press a button and the whole thing just pops into your head and materializes? I mean, the way that technology is going nowadays, it certainly seems to be the case that a lot of the old methods of accumulating knowledge or entertainment are slowly dying out, right? It's all turning the way of sci-fi now. What was deemed sci-fi, I suppose, a few years earlier is now reality with like cars that run on electricity and self-driving cars. I used to watch a program called Knight Rider many years back. Many of you may be familiar with that. With David Hasselhoff, you had Kit, you had Michael Knight, and the idea of a talking self-driving car was extremely novel and considered the stuff of sci-fi. But of course now you have similar things in place anyway. So yeah, who's to say that comic books will not be wiped out in their current form? And then the offshoot question from that is that if you take away the excitement of purchasing a paper comic book and opening the pages and savoring the smell of the pages and then reading that book, if that's gone, then basically, are they still comic books? Are they still will they still be the same thing that we grew up with? I suppose you can't deny that change is inevitable. Change will come. We either become a part of that change or we get washed away by that change. Before you had comic books as we know them and love them now, you used to have, funny pages in newspapers. And then those became collections, and then, a superhero idea was born. You had one comic here, one comic there, then entire teams sprang up. You had, black superheroes, Latin superheroes, femme fatale lady superheroes, all sorts of things started happening. But obviously this happened during a period of time. In the initial stages when the first comic book came out, I don't think one could have imagined that eventually, almost 100 years down the road, these characters would be found on the big screen, and that they would be known the world over. Children and adults alike would be massive fans. There would be like a multi-billion-dollar industry around these particular characters. I mean, I don't think anyone would have imagined that, but that's exactly what happened. But the way that they've been able to reach these heights is by embracing new things and perhaps not worrying so much about letting go of older things. And I'm not saying that Marvel or DC are going to do away with the idea of having paper comic books altogether. Mind you, having said that, there's talk nowadays of getting rid of paper currency. That's pretty important. So if they can do that and just make it all electronic, what's to say? Who's to say that in the future you will have no more paper books? You will just have everything will be downloadable on an app or in your brain as part of that implant I mentioned earlier. And for those people in the future, that will be perfectly normal. I mean, I would say that they would miss out on the beauty and the fun of that experience of buying a comic book and reading it. But they're not going to give a damn. If you can't relate to something, you're not going to miss it. In a way, I suppose in that sense, I am a bit of a dinosaur. I suppose many people who are like me, collectors, old school collectors, are dinosaurs. We're the last of a dying breed, and that's okay. That's okay. It's not such a massive, great tragedy. I mean, look, I've had a good run reading comic books and loving every moment of it. Well, more or less. I've read some stinkers in the past also, which I didn't enjoy as much. But the point is that it was a paper book, a paper comic book. It's a bit like when you have people who like to buy books on Kindle, and then you have people who like to buy those same books but in paper format because they like the feel of the paper. They like the feel of opening up a page and sitting by the fireside with a hot cup of cocoa and reading that book. And right now I sound like a completely old, you know, grandma. I completely understand, but there are people who enjoy that. And I think that slowly there is a danger that may be taken away. Well, I mean, taken away. It'll just change into something else. No one's going to, I suppose, take it away from you. It is all about supply and demand, isn't it? Or demand and supply. If people like a particular format, if people continue to like the idea of paper comic books, and I think the new generation won't give a damn either way, then it'll stay. But if they don't really have a big investment in it, then it won't. And maybe 20, 30 years from now, not straight away, I think maybe 20, 30 years from now, we will talk about, or the generation after us will talk about comic books as just a historical reference, but not the reality of present day. And I think that will be a sad day. But will we be around to even see that? Who knows? Like I say, you already get electronic comic books, but you still have the paper counterpart. And I, for one, would like to keep the paper around for as long as it can be around. Anyway, guys, that's me. That's my ramble for the day. Thank you again for tuning in, and yeah, like and subscribe if you will. I will see you in the next one. Bye.